just raise your hand and direct the question to one of the candidates, and then if other candidates want to chime in, that's fine as well. Let's keep answers to about a minute tonight. Questions, anybody? Yes, sir. Would you stand up, please? Thank you.
We have all heard repeatedly that we want the federal government out of our business on matters that are local, such as education. But that means also, does it not, that a great amount of the budget that we use and rely on goes with that? And if so, how are we going to replace that? Am I right or wrong about that? And I'll direct this question to Representative Hughes.
Well, thanks, Judge. It's an important question. In case you didn't hear, the concern is if we say no to the federal role of education, what about federal money? Which I think we understand, and we all know that federal money is our money. It's money they took from us, and then they want to put strings to give it back. 1979, when Jimmy Carter established the Department of Education, or put it at cabinet level, if you go back and look at the act creating it, it said, we want to help, but it said, in no way should the federal government displace the state and local role in public education. And we see how that's turned out. Again, this is not just in public ed, in transportation, in so many areas we have to fight the feds because they take our money, they want to attach strings to give it back to us. And we just have to say no. And the good news is so far, when we said no to the No Child Left Behind money, we were able to make that money up with state and local money. Yes, it's going to be a hard transition at times. But if the feds are wanting to put strings on local education or public education in Texas, we have to say no.
Deja vu. I think a wise man just said a couple of minutes ago that the only way you're going to be able to replace those funds is through economic development. Okay?
Well, I believe that soon we're going to elect a new president, and that new president is going to be the leader that we need to move the federal government out of that, and so we can get adequate funding without those strings attached. It takes an executive order to make that happen, and we have the Congress in place. We just need the executive in place to help us.
I think we need to stop chasing federal dollars for everything. We need to be sovereign and independent. They're not, in all due respect, and I know you'll agree with me, it's not just strings, they're chains, they're constrictions. We need to do it ourselves, and we need to move towards freedom at every level.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, you can't get off that easy.
Okay, so
I'll just ask a general question, and this is for all of you. And I know, Red, you've probably struggled with on the school board. Mike, you've probably seen this working with the other teachers. David and Brian, this is no charge against you guys because this is something that you guys have fought for in the session before, and I've seen you do it. Unfunded mandates. Some of these schools, some of the local schools bear the burden of these mandates that seem to be so famously passed down from either the state or the federal legislature to, for example, to teacher pay raises and numerous other ventures that are further charged down to our local schools. How would you face these unfunded mandates, and what would you do to stop that or cure that issue instead of putting that burden on the local communities?
Me personally, I think it's going to be a big fight. But you know, one of the things I learned in the military, and I bet I can speak for Red too. One of the things, I knew that, but he didn't know it was going to be a negative. I'm just kidding. One of the things we learned in a leadership capacity is to let things go down to the lowest common denominator. Red had officers under him. He didn't go and micromanage them. He said, this is what we need, and they went and they did it. And that's what we have to push for, is we have to get the state and the federal government off our back, let the people at the local level do what they do. And what we have to do is be very adamant about it, very forceful. And I have the kind of mouth where I don't mind going out talking about it publicly when things don't go our way.
I've also supported the bills that were for high-performing schools, basically gave more freedom. That should be it was to be a pilot program. One of them I know the Governor Perry vetoed. That was a wrong step. I would like to get rid of as many of the mandates as possible from the TEA, from our statutes in Austin, and leave it to parents and local school boards to determine what the curriculum is. Some schools would do well, some wouldn't, but they would learn.
This is a love fest.
It is. Really simple to me. If it's important enough to mandate, it's important enough to fund. If you can't fund it, don't mandate.
Each one of these mandates, I'm sure made sense at the time when it was put in place, but they mound up, they pile up. A couple of sessions ago, there was a concern about bullying, and we're familiar with that. It happens, and we have to do something about it. But there was a bill that came through that said we're going to require reporting and an action plan when bullying takes place. Now, nobody's for bullying, but I didn't think we needed yet another mandate, more red tape on our teachers, our public schools. I voted no. I got criticized for that. But I mean, we don't need more mandates, and so we gotta say no unless there's a real good reason that we fund it. And again, that's why I supported Hybrid Homing Schools Coalition bill to get out from under those mandates, and why this last session we supported Districts of Innovation. And the good news is that's the law today. And so here, in a matter of weeks, we hope we can have school districts that can begin to apply to the commissioner to get out from under some of these ridiculous mandates. We got to keep going that direction.
Questions? Yes.
You've been talking about East Texas and how we're right now unfairly treated evidently in the state, and we don't have the funding that others would for whatever reason, or it doesn't seem like it. This is addressed really for those who are in the legislature right now. Why are we in that situation? Why is East Texas having a problem where we're not competing as far as for funds as these other areas are? And then secondly, who are you working with now or in the future that's going to make that different if it hasn't already happened since you've been there?
That's a great question. Many of the issues we face in the legislature are rural versus urban, rural versus suburban. I know Tyler is not rural, but our general area is. We could say Northeast Texas is generally rural compared to the rest of the state. And as population shifts to those suburban areas, it's a real challenge. It's the fact we have to keep fighting it. Those school funding formulas are based on growth, and so these fast growth suburban schools fare much better. That's where most of the population is, that's where most of the votes are. So it's democracy. So what do we have to do? We have to stick together. Rural folks have to stick together. We have to use our seniority and use our relationships to make sure we don't get left behind. As a practical matter, in this last legislative session on the Appropriations Committee, I worked to restore some of the lost funding, and we made it a little bit more equitable. We pushed for more, but we're moving the ball. But yeah, we've got a way to go to make sure that every child's treated the same way.
I believe that the money should follow the student in the public system. And that's the only way you can do it when you have a constitutional mandate to provide a system for funding. And the problem is the present system is extremely convoluted. And it depends what you were doing at the time the law was really passed. And if you were being irresponsible, actually, some of the school districts, they got rewarded. And some of the school districts that were being responsible and careful got penalized. So it's a shame that we've waited for 5 years now, I believe, 4 years, to fix the funding of the system.
I'll make a comment. So one of the things that I believe we need to do as far as funding is concerned is to involve those people from the local districts in the funding model that we create. We continue to create funding models that go before a court system because they're unfair and they're not equitable. So why don't we go back in and get local people, just like you, local superintendents, and local principals to assist in creating a model on how we fund, instead of getting a bunch of legislatures who have no earthly idea how to fund a school system to create a model that will not stand up in a court case.
Can I say something? Again, I'm going to speak for Ed. This is going to get fun. You know, in the military, we had to plan for contingencies. We had to plan for things before they ever happened. Because if we didn't, our people died. And that's unacceptable. For year after year after year, we sent people back down to deal with some of these problems that are the same problems we've been dealing with for how long? kept borrowing money from you, saying they're gonna pay it back, and after 14, 15 years, they haven't, would you stop loaning them money? You probably would. We need to have people down there who will be proactive, start working on these problems before we ever get deep and dug in. We need to fix the problems.